And I want to know about your book and what inspired you to write this book, a little bit about your background and all the fun stuff about Alessandra.
So, um, well, I'm going to start with a general statement that maybe a lot of people can relate to, and that is that I think throughout my life, I always knew I wanted to write a book. Um, and that was just something vague and present in the back of my mind. And of course, I was like, I don't know what I'm going to write about. I would start and stop and start and stop. And um, this book really sprouted, though, from a moment that I wasn't looking to write a book. Basically, the short story is I worked in corporate. I followed the tried and true path of, college, job, second job, MBA while working, um, all the career type A moves that one can do. And fast forward 5 years ago, I moved to Italy. And actually, no, sorry, fast forward 3 years ago, we all had COVID. We all experienced the COVID situation, and essentially, I finally came to the realization of how disconnected I was living my life, and how much my and at the time I wouldn't have been able to define this way, but how much my inner value was dependent on the external. So what am I making in my job? What am I doing? What are my goals? How am I meeting targets? And all of these trips. So I was working internationally. So I was flying all over the place. And um, COVID hit about 2 months after I ended mutually. I ended a 4-year relationship. So I was ultra alone. Which was fantastic from a universal standpoint. From a human point, you're like, this sucks. But the universe was like, yeah, big lessons coming. So I was home alone in my apartment in Italy, and I think it was about 2 weeks before I cracked. At first I'm like, okay, I can do this. This is fine. And like, global webinars and everybody's coming together and like all this stuff is going on that we remember. And then at one point, I just had like a really, really bad day. And, I think you realize in those moments how close you are on the line of sanity versus insanity. Um, just when you're alone, it's just incredible. Maybe now we're more used to it. Maybe COVID broke us in. I think at this point, after all of the work and the work I continue to do, I'd probably really love 2 weeks to myself this way. But at the time, it was a nightmare. I was directly confronted with myself. And so meditation found me. So, a friend of mine whispered to me, I've been following this account, you might want to try it. And so really I started doing it because I had nothing else to do. I was tired of drinking plus I was in Italy, so I was following like US times and Italy times for happy hours. And, of course, like we know that wasn't exactly like for the pleasures of drinking. It was very much a numbing thing. And so when I started meditating for an hour in the day, I learned to love myself. I mean, to see myself and love myself and feel myself in my own body. And at first it was really just 1 hour, but it started like just like expanding all around me. And so much so that I started just writing my own resolutions and how they were coming to me and how I was feeling. And so that became the first blueprint for the book. I wrote about 72 meditations, which were really reflective chats. And then I was sending them to friends through WhatsApp and, just trying to, hey, if this helps you too, like I've realized these things from my personal problem last week. And so it was like a variety of topics, and, it starts with finding yourself. And so, and that was 3 years ago. So then eventually the book is an elaboration of a lot of other modalities that came into my life. And as I began to explore other ways of connecting to myself and to my consciousness and to, the powers around us and like the dimensions around us, then more insights poured through, more neutrality poured through, less of a suffering frequency, like less of like, hey, I'm so sorry you're sad, and more like, the world is great, actually. Like, come in and join us in this area, you know? So it took about 2.5 years to pull the book together. And and really it's about, you know, unpeeling yourself. So it's unpeel yourself, because basically at the end of it all, we just have so many socially constructed implications of who we need to be or what we need to be. And that's fine if we realize it's a story. But when we believe it so much and we take it so seriously, then we're the ones that suffer, because we're not seeing who we truly are, which is, you know, a lot more simple yet complex than it needs to, you know, than we see it as. So, or a lot more simple. Forget about the complex. The complexities are the beauty of life. But so this is how it all came about, basically.
I love that. And thank you so much for sharing that. And believe me, banana sounds better than peeling off layers of an onion.
Right. Yeah. My mother suggested I should make it that, and I was like, well, sure. The concept is there. It's a bit, you know, more predictable.
Yeah,
So,
I know.
and
Yeah, I
more
know.
unpredictable. Why not be unpredictable and funny, and it's really meant to reflect also the humor of life. Again, like, I think the more that I am working also now with clients that tend to be in the corporate profile, what I see from this external lens is just how seriously sometimes people take things. And it's like, it's not that serious. You know, it's a game. Life is not all of it. Life itself is real and true, but everything we have around us right now, it's just a kind of a game. And
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
so it's
Yes.
cool.
A game is correct. And like, I love what you said. You have a great point. People do take life so seriously. And why? I wonder why. What is there? What is there to be so serious about? This is your life and have fun. And I think a lot of it was that we were conditioned, we were influenced, and we didn't go within, like you've mentioned before. We never really went within. And I love the fact that you brought up meditation because, and there's different forms of meditation. I was just learning about there's a form of meditation just using life as experiences as a meditation. I'm like, hey, yeah, that's a good point. But there are different avenues you can take with meditation. But I've learned when I've meditated, and I use it as prayer as well. That's my meditation time. And I will go ahead and just have my quiet time and breathe so comfortably. And then I'm starting to cry and I notice like all these emotions coming out. And I'm like, what is this stuff coming out? Now, have you experienced any type of thing where you're just like your body's releasing something?
Yes. Definitely there have been times, and when that happens, it's kind of like, it's funny because it's like, on the one hand you sound like you're like ugly crying, and at the other hand you're like, but I'm feeling great, don't worry, like, don't worry about me out here. I'm like, but it's good. Yes, absolutely. And I've done, you know, and I've had it, you know, suddenly for things that I recognize the reason behind it. You know, maybe one day I was meditating. I used to meditate with my dog, and I thought about her, and but it had been a year and a half since she had passed, and suddenly that day I mourned her. But I was like, this is really important. Like, I needed to cry this. I was so strong for so long, or maybe, you know, or maybe I tried to put a lens on it, like, yeah, her energy form has transformed, and, you know, and of course that is all true. But a part of me in my heart wanted to also release some sadness, and other times I've cried for planets. Like, you know, in the
Yeah.
middle of a meditation, I'm like, I'm crying for the earth. And you know, at first when this happened to me, I was still very much like in my business hat, and I thought it was absolutely ridiculous that I just put on a breath work meditation and suddenly I'm crying for the earth, as if it was like the biggest tragedy of my, you know, something happened to like my closest friend, you know, something like that. So I think there's definitely a place for releasing actually